Okay, hello everybody. Welcome to Advisory Design Panel on Thursday, October 21st. First, like to acknowledge that this meeting's been held digitally on Squamish Nation traditional territory. Second item of the agenda, I would like to have the adoption. Oh, hang on. Yeah, I'll adopt the agenda first. So could I have someone motion to adopt it? Brent, thank you. Seconded. Carlos, perfect. Okay, before we get into the minutes, I'd like to welcome some new members to the panel. I believe we've got Elizabeth Lang, who is a member at large. Elizabeth, would you like to reintroduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Lang. I'm an intern landscape architect. I do garden design in town. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Welcome to the panel. Do we have anyone else who is a new member of the ADB panel? Speak now or...
I don't believe so.
No?
I think Elizabeth is the only new one. There's two more members, one from AIBC and one from BCSLA, but I don't see them here.
Okay, perfect. Then I will go into the minutes, next agenda item minutes. Does anybody have any comments about the previously issued minutes from July 22nd? No. Can I have someone to adopt those minutes? Who's fastest? Kareem, seconded. Carlos, sorry, Carlos. Okay, next, first matter of business, we require to elect a new chair to the panel. So what I would like to ask, I'm currently the vice chair, so I would like to ask anyone on the committee who would like to nominate another member to become chair, and then we will take a vote. And based on the online system, we would, the vote would be only registering if you have a nay vote against that person. So I'll open it to the floor. Is there anyone who would like to suggest a nomination for someone?
Do you not want to run?
No. I love being vice chair. It's second in command. Anybody else?
I think Carlos is second or maybe the longest standing other than you, David. I don't know. So I'll nominate Carlos.
Okay, yeah, I would support that in general just because of his breadth of knowledge and his experience on the panel. Okay, if no one else any other comments, I'll just put it to a vote. So anyone who is against that, please say nay. Okay, I think that's motion passed. Carlos, congratulations, you're the new chair of the ADP panel. What I'll do now then is I'll do a handover. What I'll do now is I'll do a handover to you, Carlos. So
okay.
Normal system here is probably to go around the room and do a roll call for yourself. Write down the names in order, and then I typically do a column on the right hand side for questions and comments, and then it's quite logical to see who's done comments and questions that way. Jonas, is there any other procedural thing I should do before handing over to our new chair? No?
No,
Okay.
no.
Carlos,
Right.
take it away.
Wonderful. I wish I had my second screen for this.
I know. Don't ever try to do it on a phone. It's terrible.
Yeah, I guess so. Okay, so just doing a quick roll call here with David, Brent, in order as I see them. Elizabeth, Kareem, Catherine, and Sarah. And do we have anyone else that doesn't have their screen on right now that is part of advisory design panel, or is everyone else project team or staff? Looks like it's project team or staff. Okay. And so Jonas, for quorum, we require 2 architects. Is that correct?
No, we require one architect.
Okay.
So we need 5 people, and one of them has to be an architect.
Perfect. Okay, we've got quorum. Excellent. All right, so if I'm, God, I really got pushed into this one, eh? So thank you for that, David. Glad to have a vice chair or a vice chair with me, so that's wonderful. Without any further ado, we'll pass it to District Planner Carrie Hamilton to discuss Development Permit 564 Waterfront Landing Phase 3A. I believe this is the second time we're seeing this permit. Great. Take it away.
Perfect. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Carrie Hamilton, planner at the District of Squamish. And as Carlos said, I'm going to be presenting to you DPA 564 for Waterfront Landing 3A. And this is the second time it's come back to this committee for review. And just wanted to highlight that a number of the changes have been made, including some of the staff's concern, which were around parking. And right now, staff is just looking for the committee to comment on just a few remaining items and changes that were made from the first ADP. One of them is the connectivity pathways. The pathways have changed again in terms of orientation, so just want to have the committee's look, especially the landscape architect look on that design. As well as there's building materials changes that have been incorporated. So they are proposing to have 2 types of materials on one side and another 2 different designs on the other side of the building. So looking for the committee's comments, particularly on that change of material from on the same building. And then, and they have also incorporated a new material here, which is board and batten lap set and a lap siding on the side too. So the third piece is just the active park use. So I have provided a lot more information in your report just around the different parks that currently the Waterfront Landing has either built or is proposing to build, just to give you this committee context in terms of staff's comments and wanting to get feedback around particularly the place pieces in that neighborhood park. So please refer back to your report to kind of get a little bit more context about some of the other pieces that are being proposed, and would look forward to hearing some comments around that. And I will hand it over to the architect and the BOSA team to present the project, the revised project.
Hi everyone, I'm Paige Ritchie, Development Manager with BOSA Properties. Hoping to just see maybe some thumbs up. You can hear me okay. I'm getting some lag on my end. Good. So thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I find that every opportunity I get to engage with city staff, advisory design panel, or the greater Squamish community on this project leads to greater understanding of community needs and what the development industry can do to meet those needs. So with that, I'd like to give a brief recap on where things are at with 3A, as well as a minor update on the adjacent phases. So I'll start with the adjacent phases. We're wrapping up final conditions for building permits on the 2 rental buildings in phase 3B and C, which are both which are north of the 3A site. Both have an approval in principle, so we're hoping to begin construction there shortly. To the south of phase 3A, we have phase 2, which includes 134 townhomes in 18 buildings. 4 of these buildings have now received occupancy permits, which include 33 homes, and we're looking to receive occupancy on the next 2 buildings by the end of the year. The North Waterfront Park, which is the long linear park that runs adjacent to all phases 2, 3A, and 3B and C, between the residential lands and the Mancram Blind Channel. We've started grading and invasive species removal since receiving our environmental development permit earlier in the year. A servicing agreement submission was made in early August, and further refinement of pathways and construction details are underway since receiving comments back from district staff just last week. The notable aspects of the park that are specifically adjacent to 3A are the pump track and the main playground. And for those of you who were here back in July, if you remember, there are 3 access points from 3A into the park. I'll ask Mike Enns to point these out later in the presentation. The pump track is accessible by the pathway from the midpoint on the north side of 3A and will be suitable for a range of age groups and abilities. The main playground, which is directly accessible by the pathway that sits between Phase 2 and 3A, will include slides, swings, climbable play equipment, as well as a track ride or zip line style play piece. The northernmost pathway access point from 3A will lead to a more naturalized area of the park, as well as a half-court basketball court that will sit at the end of Laurelwood Road next to 3B and C. We're hoping to receive a servicing agreement approval on the park by the end of the year. And now, since attending ADP for Phase 3A back in July, we as a project team heard your feedback and rectified the main issues. First of which was we have reduced our unit count from 65 to 62, and all homes have a minimum driveway length of 6 meters. We were previously proposing 7 visitor stalls and 1 car share stall. We're now providing 12 visitor stalls. And we've increased the color palette and revisited the exterior materials, further to what Carrie had mentioned. We have also added a dog park and refined the landscaped areas. And we appreciate the opportunity to represent this phase to you today. And I'll hand things over to Mark Blackwood to speak further to the changes we've made.
Great.
Sorry, just quickly before you step in, and just to help Carlos, I believe Jamie has joined. So the minutes should show that. And Jamie, are you a new member?
Yes, yeah, I am. First panel for me. Sorry, I had some WebEx issues and had to restart my machine at the start.
Okay, could you maybe
all in there, Jamie?
Yeah, it happens. Would you like to just quickly introduce yourself to the panel?
So I'm Jamie Hart. Just recently is my first time on panel, and I've got about 9 or 10 years experience, most of which is here in BC. So it's kind of spread up and down the Sea to Sky corridor. I lived in Whistler for about 6-7 years. I was working in a firm up there, and now I'm based in the city. My main focus is on residential projects, and in particular, sort of highly energy efficient and low embodied carbon sort of multi-unit residential projects. So hopefully I can make a good contribution to all these emerging developments in Squamish.
Excellent. Thanks so much. Throw it back to the project team.
Great. Thanks very much. Everyone hear me okay? Wonderful. So I'm just noticing on my screen here. Oh, there we go. Now I can share. Perfect. Okay. I'm just going to share the screen here. Okay. Everyone seeing my screen okay? Perfect. Okay, thanks everyone. My name is Mark Blackwood. I'm principal with Acoustics Architecture, and been involved with Waterfront Landing from near the beginning, working on all the previous phases of construction that have happened on this site to date. As mentioned, this is the second appearance at design panel for Phase 3A here at Waterfront Landing. And there were some kind of key items, as both Carrie and Paige has mentioned, that we were asked to address as we sort of come forward to panel second time here. I think everyone's generally familiar with the location as presented last time, and kind of within the overall site, kind of the approximate location of our 3A site within the overall context of the Waterfront Landing development. And as window out of the way here, just a further breakdown and maybe to sort of clarify some of the phasing that's happened that Paige was describing. Lot 1 is currently complete, townhouse development. Lot 2 is currently under construction. Lots, the red here, kind of labeled 4 and 16 here. That's a little outdated, but are the 2 6-story rental buildings that will be starting construction shortly, and then our project site, which is Lot 3, or better known as Lot 3A. One of the comments in the early days of the kind of when Waterfront Landing was conceived, there were sort of a series of connectivity diagrams that were produced to sort of ensure that Waterfront Landing has indeed good pedestrian and vehicular connectivity through the overall site. And sort of 3A, if I zoom in a little bit here, is kind of bound by this. Let's go on a little bit further. This yellow line here and kind of this blue line here. So you can see in the early planning stages, this was kind of the connectivity diagram that was anticipated. Through our work on the various sites, we've actually kind of gone above and beyond kind of the initial connectivity that was initially envisioned for Waterfront Landing. And as you can see, as sort of the various developments have kind of come into play, the connectivity and permeability through the sites has been maintained and even enhanced. Just quickly, just sort of a bit of a blocking of kind of the various neighborhoods that were envisioned at Waterfront Landing. These 3 phases, phase 1, 2, and 3, is kind of envisioned as sort of the Woods neighborhood. And then there are sort of future developments of, against the Bluff and kind of the Landing, which is kind of on the waterfront. So this kind of collection of, 3A, B, and C will be kind of the last developments in kind of the Woods neighborhood. I'm going to skip over this slide and kind of dive right into it. Okay, so the site plan for 3A, as mentioned at the last panel, there were a number of items that we were asked to address. And since then, the previous application was at 65 units. With the massaging of the site plan to achieve the various elements, we are now at a unit count of 62. So we've kind of gone down 3 units from the previous time at design panel here. And a lot of that had to do with the removal of, we were previously asking for variances along this property line and the property line adjacent to the North Park. So that has all been resolved. Buildings have been moved further away from the property line, and now no variances are being sought after as it relates to the setbacks. The other kind of fine tuning and manipulation of the plan that occurred was ensuring each building has the minimum 6-meter deep driveway apron to allow kind of a full car to park on the apron. So that has been accommodated for every unit on the site now. So every unit either has a side-by-side garage with 2 parking on the apron, or in the tandem configuration, 1 parking stall inside the unit and 1 parking stall on the apron as well. As Paige mentioned, the various locations for visitor parking has been fine-tuned to now provide the full 12 visitor parking stalls on the site, as the car share was not deemed favorable just because of the need for kind of more physical stalls for visitors on the site. The other adjustment that was made is, for those of you who were on panel, the rear decks were increased from 6 feet to 8 feet to kind of increase the available kind of private outdoor space for each of the units. So the gray shaded area here kind of indicates, the 8-foot decks by the full width of the unit for each home on the site. So all of these tweaks kind of more or less kept the general composition of the site plan intact, and were able to retain kind of the connectivity that was previously envisioned, really just improved on kind of the parking and the outdoor space. And obviously, with slight adjustments, we had to lose those three units. I'll let Mike from Loci sort of dive a little deeper into the specifics of the landscape plan and connectivity. Well, the landscape plan. I'll do the connectivity. Here we go. So just sort of an overlay diagram, sort of what was, just to make a little bit clearer what was kind of shown in that little key diagram previously. You know, we have Coho Way here. There's a new multi-use trail that separates 3A to the proposed apartment buildings, which is on this side. And this particular one here is part of a overall looping system that would be kind of wrapping all the way around the waterfront landing neighborhood. So, you know, strong connections to the North Park, and then kind of midway connections as well, you know, in between buildings to ensure that there's good connections to the North Park, and then also connections through to ensure that there's pedestrian connectivity back to Coho Way as well. So kind of a nice meshwork of pedestrian trails through the site. One of the other items that was brought up last day as well, we had two gray color schemes in the proposal. One was sort of a dark gray, the other was a lighter gray, and overall I think the panel felt that there was not enough color variation within the overall project. So the lighter gray color palette was removed and sort of introduced a blue color scheme. So the key diagram here indicates how the various color schemes are distributed throughout the site to ensure that as one is kind of moving along the interior lanes, there's a lot of variation in the streetscapes and the materials and colors, and you know, there isn't that sense of the project feeling too gray. There's some punches of color throughout the development. And then on the right here, just an indication of kind of how those color palettes get applied to the you know, the various buildings and what those color combinations look like. Just some updates really to kind of where some of the architectural influences came from. You know, phase one was very much about this kind of some more symmetrical gable. And also phase two was kind of very symmetrical in its gables as well. In the phase three, we're kind of looking to do more of these kind of offset gable roofs, which I think is a nice complement to the gables, but, you know, creates a bit of you know, identity for this this phase while still kind of feeling cohesive with the overall development. Similar to phase one, we're looking to kind of incorporate a lot of corrugated metal into the facades, and to also sort of tie in with the phase two development right next to it, which uses board and batten as sort of a primary material. We're also introducing board and batten into the phase 3A, so it's a nice kind of blend of the developments that surround it. The vertical board and batten, I think, is also a nice complement to the vertical corrugated metal that we're using on the front facades of buildings. So we'll see that later on in some renderings. So these images here just begin to look at some of the design evolution. So this is the phase one community already built. These are the phase two townhomes currently under construction with some complete. And in phase 3A now, looking at these kind of offset gables to sort of make sure each of these little kind of pocket neighborhoods have their own identity, but kind of hold together as an overall community. So on this elevation here, we see that kind of vertical corrugated metal the fiber cement panel, metal canopies, kind of accent panels that begin to sort of tie windows together. The windows would be trimmed out in kind of a finer kind of shadow box kind of detail to kind of get a nice shadow and kind of clean edge around those punched openings. And then the offset roof forms, which are a little bit more playful and maybe more reminiscent of kind of the surrounding mountain landscape. And then in kind of the dark gray scheme, again, kind of using the corrugated metal. So it's really that corrugated metal material that changes throughout the various color schemes. And I'll also point out in the previous iteration when this project was presented, there were just sort of the two gables, one on this end and one on this end. And the units in between were connected by a long kind of horizontal continuous fascia. I think some of the comments from panel and staff were, it'd be nice to kind of introduce a bit more, a few more of these kind of gables into the roof line. So gable roofs were added to sort of these mid-block units as well, which again further kind of creates a bit of an identity for kind of the groupings of residential homes. So just a little bit of a blow up, kind of this is in the red corrugated metal, the use of metal canopies and tie rods with the fiber cement panels. And a lot of the windows at the lower levels have also been increased because since we moved the parking stall or one parking stall out to the apron, we were able to now accommodate more kind of den and flex spaces on the main floor at the front. So that's kind of nice. Now we actually have real living space on the fronts of the units and promoting things like eyes on the street and just kind of overall sort of a nicer animated experience down at the ground level. And then as we look to the rear, here we see sort of the introduction of that vertical board and batten. The idea is to do a tighter spacing on the batten to sort of give it a little bit more of a contemporary look and tie in more with the texture and feel of the corrugated metal. And again, on the rear, having these kind of metal canopies, which kind of complements the front entrances as well. So now there's a lot more sort of color on the lane side, which was a request or a consideration of panel last time. So this would be kind of the front of a similar building. So the idea is the blues would match on each side of the building. And then similar with the red. And then the red board and batten on the rear. So as you move through, actually, because to access this site, you actually have to drive through the phase 2 development, which has a lot of board and batten on it. And so the idea is this board and batten on the lane becomes a little bit of this kind of consistent language on this side of the buildings. And then in the dark gray scheme, again, the vertical corrugated metal, and then the darker board and batten on the rear. The unit mix has changed a little bit. We're still kind of 2-3 bedroom, 2 in den and 3 bedroom units. But as I mentioned, with kind of the rejigging of the site plan and the parking, we're always now getting these kind of flex or kind of den spaces at the front of the buildings. So we're actually got living space on the Mews and on the North Park. So it's a little bit nicer of an interface. So with that, I won't kind of go through all the unit plans in detail here, but I'll maybe kind of hand it over to you, Mike, to dive into the landscape.
Just before we go there, I just want to give you guys a heads up that we're well past the 10 minutes on the presentation, so please wrap it up if you can.
You bet.
Thank you.
Sounds good. With that said, hey everybody, it's Mike Enns from Lokai Landscape Architecture. I'll go a little bit quickly because some of these big ideas and thematics are sort of just revisiting what we've already presented. So these are some of the design thematics that we incorporated in design intent for the landscape, natural materials, sustainable reuse of local materials, rainwater management, social gathering spaces. Mark, I think, are you controlling that, Mark? You want to just keep going? There we go. The overall plan, Mark, you mentioned connectivity and general physical permeability. I think it's really good. Accessible pathways, hard surfaces for people with all different abilities to move east, west, and north, south up to the waterfront park. Couple main sort of key changes to the overall landscape plan. In the central area, the central area is still sort of the general gathering space. We've just changed the programming a little bit to reflect the different space. The sizes of spaces have changed between buildings. So in number 5 in the middle there, we've reprogrammed that to be a dog park after speaking with BOSA and some of the that being one of the things that are missing from the master plan. And number 4, right in the middle, is still the main gathering space and program for outdoor picnicking, kid play, and generally, seating opportunities and passive recreation. Number 8 down at the very bottom there's sort of a forest walk that was a carryover from the original plan, but again, promoting entries into the site at different areas and allowing people to move through the site and connect with the larger trails and connecting up to the waterfront park. On the east side, we have the main Greenway Trail, and going at number 2 there in the side middle, you have a grand staircase coming down from the adjacent phase, which essentially shares the Greenway Trail from phase 3, B, and C. I will just keep moving, Mark. I think the next one would be sort of a planting strategy. Similar to what we had before, most of the planting hardy native plants and trees and conifers. Key entry points, gathering spaces in the perimeter are where we're locating most of the accent planting perennials, ornamental grasses. We also we're proposing a seasonal rainwater detention area next to the dog park in the middle there. A lot of evergreen, a lot of native plant material to buffer the buildings and to create that year-round green and plant material, and also this bear-proof plant strategy, not attracting bears onto the site. Next slide, please, Mark. I think I won't go into detail with the plant, but I think just to the plant, a good selection of deciduous trees, conifers, and foundation shrubs, and then perennials. There you go. Next few slides are just some blow-ups of some of the components of the public realm. So this is the forest walk. You can see the little key plant down at the bottom. A meandering way to go around the existing pump station and connect with the larger pedestrian circulation. And this eventually takes you to the dog park. And also you can go through that and around that and up to the waterfront park. Next slide. I think the next one is a blow up of the off-leash dog park and the seasonal detention pond. Lots of places to sit and also functions as a sort of a flex open lawn area as well. Entry nodes are connected to the larger pedestrian network as well. And the last one would be the central, there's a section to give you an idea of the relationship between the rain garden and the dog park and the fencing beyond that. And then the central gathering space, which you'll see on the right, you have a covered picnic area and sort of a sun seating deck overlooking the kid play area, which is at this time focused more on natural materials, logs, boulders. There's lots of those types of things on the existing site. So trying to reuse existing elements that can be easily located in place and also support the overall thematics of living in Squamish and connecting people with the natural setting. That's a section through that looking north. The plaza on the right and the play area in the middle. And then we have some site perimeter treatment. So this this first section in the top left, I believe, is on the north edge. So having the multi-use path on the waterfront park side of things, and then we have a tiered planting, trees and hedges, and lower planting with the fence and the patio. The top right section is reflecting the raised patios to the townhomes along the Greenway Trail along the east side of the site. And the section on the bottom is a section going through that grand staircase, sort of a tiered staircase with seating, taking people from 3B and C down to the social heart of our site. The furnishing palette, most of these are carried over from phase 1. So what worked well there, we're trying to replicate in phase 3, and some of the furnishing and the trash receptacles and the bike racks reflect that. And the last slide is sort of the approach to lighting. You see most of the lighting is focused on the pedestrian wayfinding to make movement in and around the pathways and the common areas safe and welcoming at all times of the day. Those are reflected. The pink square are pedestrian bollards. The blue are some pole lighting for area lights. Again, those are focused more on the common areas. And then we have some key areas where we're uplighting some feature trees at the entries just to extend the lighting out into the landscape a little bit. But this is certainly a step down from what we had originally showed in the first advisory design panel, where we had quite a bit more tree uplighting. So we've toned that down in response to some of the panel's comments. I think that's it. Thanks, Mark.
Okay, thanks, Mike. If it's on to us now, yeah, just conscious of time, we did have this timed item being done at 3:15. So advisory design panel members, let's just keep our questions concise. And for the new members, please only ask questions during this period, and then you'll have another round for comments. I'm going to go in the order of the roll call. So David, if you want to go first with your questions.
Yeah, hi. 2 questions. Balcony, was there any consideration to adding an additional overhang? It seems, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's that's always a bit of a balance there. The rear of these units, similar to the previous phases, they have the metal canopies and the wood soffit, so it's a sort of a nice canopy over the rear door. But it is limited to kind of the doorways, and I think leaves the rest of the balcony open for quite flexible for kind of furniture and umbrellas and things like that. But yeah, it is limited to the doors themselves.
Okay, thanks. And then what's the strategy for minimizing overlook, particularly between building 1 and 6 from one unit to another?
So those their balconies are on opposite sides. So their outdoor space is kind of separated. So you're always kind of separated by at least a lane, plus the depth of the depth of the driveways as well. This is kind of the tightest point of the development, but I think the splaying out of the buildings kind of opens up your perception of space between those 2 buildings.
Okay, thanks. That's all my questions, Carlos.
Great, thanks. Brent, you're up next.
Yeah, thanks, Carlos. Thanks, guys. I don't have any questions today. Thanks.
Okay, Elizabeth.
I don't have any questions either.
Great, thank you. Kareem?
Oh, sorry, no questions from me.
Look at this. Catherine?
How large is the dog park?
You want to take that, Mike?
Oh, sorry. Can you just repeat that? You cut out whoever
Sorry.
spoke.
How large is the dog park in terms of square meters?
Oh, I don't have that. Let's just do the off the scale. I would say that's about 50 feet long by about 30 or 40. I mean, I'm just talking just the lawn area, but it's the fence area is actually goes all the way around, including the rain garden area, and that's part of it. So I don't know, I would say 50 times, 40 feet or so square footage there, and then plus the rain garden. So
Great, thanks. That's all I've got.
Thanks,
Actually,
Catherine.
sorry, I do have a question. Can I ask it still?
Absolutely. Is that Elizabeth?
Yeah.
Okay.
I noticed in the notes that the accessibility for the grand stairway to phase 3B was a question. Was that addressed?
So there are, I guess from an accessibility point of view, because there is such a, there's, upwards of 10 feet of grade change here. So sort of ramping is not really, not really an option. There's a ramp provided here, which kind of gives access for kind of both accessibility and for kind of bikes kind of moving from here, connecting to the Greenway Trail. The other point of accessibility that was addressed is previously, I guess we had gravel pathing here, and this has all been made hardscape now, so the pathway is all accessible through the site.
Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Elizabeth. Okay, Sarah, you're up next.
Well, Elizabeth, you stole my thunder on the accessibility question. I'll have, I've still got another question. So you're proposing that the off-leash dog area is going to be a grassy area, or is it going to be a gravel area?
We're proposing a grass area, a combination of a grass area, a planted area, and sort of a seasonal rain garden area. So there's no gravel in there. There's just there's some perimeter pathways and some seating areas, but for the most part, that open area is grass.
And there's gates on both sides of the park?
Yep.
Yep. And the other question I've got, because it is kind of a tight site, what do you do for snow management?
Yeah, I think always an issue with some of these townhome developments, but I think it's sort of finding pockets at ends of streets and whatnot as much as possible, or kind of where we do have some open space, at side yards or whatnot. But yeah, it is a bit of a we don't have a designated snow pileup area on this site plan currently. It would have to be kind of more evenly kind of distributed throughout the site.
Okay. And can you just tell me what the grade is on the ramp between building 4 and building 7? Or no, building
These
building
two,
4 and 5 that go up
4
to
and
the
5. Yeah, we're keeping this below 5%.
Okay, great. That's all my questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sarah. Jamie.
I just had one question noted. You may have already answered it, but in extending the driveways to 6 meters, did that come at the expense of any yard space, or what had to yield in order to accommodate the extended driveways between your first and second appearance?
Yeah, I guess it's a little bit of both. I guess the answer there, because on the one hand, we increased our setbacks, so the front yards for buildings 2, 5, 8, and 9 all got larger because the setbacks were increased. And then there was a slight movement or reduction of the yard space in kind of front of 6 and 7, where we had to kind of move the buildings over to achieve that 6-meter driveway length. That was a requirement by the district and is a requirement in the bylaw.
Yeah, that's it for me.
Thank you. It's on to me. Just confirming, will these be step code 4 construction?
No, this one I believe we're at 3.
Okay.
There was on this particular project, there was actually a building permit kind of submitted before Christmas of last year. So it's I guess we'll have to have further discussions with the building department of where the step code falls. I'm not sure if you had any further discussion on that page.
Just some high level discussion. We will have to resubmit some plans for building permit, but we should be held to step code 3.
Yeah.
Okay, and are there fireplaces in these units?
There is not.
Great. I guess there's the one just general question is, are there lessons learned from phase 1 to phase 2 to now that you've applied to these buildings to meet market expectations or just better design? Things that worked, things that didn't?
Well, I think the market things maybe Paige can speak to. I think from an overall design point of view, I think what's been unique about this particular site is its irregular shape. And, so in contrast to sort of the more orthogonal plan that we sort of had in phase 1, this plan is, broken down and, buildings on many different kind of angles and orientations, which I think gives it a much more, more open feel. You get less of those parallel wall faces, kind of one building onto the next. So I think for this one, the ability to kind of have nice meandering connectivity through the site and a lot of different types of spaces is going to be a real strength and a value to the residents here.
And just to add to that, BOZA has been collecting a laundry list of minor lessons learned, nothing maybe that would be of interest today, but things like sound travel between units, certain finishes, things like that we will be putting into this phase of the project, and every phase should be improved on the lessons learned from previous. So yes, to answer your question, we're putting a lot in.
Great. Okay, and we'll just move on to comments. We'll do it in the same order. David?
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. Overall, I'm personally happy with the changes made based on our feedback. And I do appreciate, the changes to the density to accommodate those. I think the parking and the visitor parking is a much more manageable strategy for this development. I'd say the only missed opportunity I see is having that awesome 8-foot deep deck with a 3-foot deep eyebrow over it. So essentially renders the deck kind of unusable unless you put an umbrella up, which can kind of somewhat deal with the rain, but can't deal with the wind. So, but other than that, yeah, thank you very much. Cheers.
Thank you, David. Brent?
Yeah, thanks, Carlos. Yeah, I agree. I think that the changes are, kind of meet our comments from the previous panel meeting. One comment that I have is I think that ensuring the great access to the waterfront pathway and then the internal loop is wide enough for someone on a bike to pass someone with a stroller comfortably would be important. I think these are only 1.5 meters currently, so I encourage those to be widened to sort of a wider multi-use type path, especially for the new bridge connection. And then I think the overall the finish I like the change, and I think that the colors and sort of combining the features that sort of highlight what the other phases have done, but are unique enough that it creates some separation, works well. So thanks for that. That's all for me.
Thank you, Brent. Elizabeth?
Hi. Okay, so I have a few comments about the planting plan. I won't get into too much detail just for time, but I'm happy to chat further if that's a possibility. So first, Betula jackmontii I don't think is particularly borer resistant, so it might be a good idea to revisit that for a feature tree. There's a lot of heather in kind of big swaths, which, you know, is fine. I think it kind of tends to struggle here some. So, you know, if you experience some big dieback, that might be something to revisit. Same with Festuca, it tends to struggle here. I think it's just a bit too wet in the wintertime. Seems like quite a few of the larger shrubs are planted a bit or spaced a bit close. For instance, like Arbutus unido, the Lonicera looks like it's kind of on top of each other and might be a problem down the road. Berberis thunbergii atropurpurea, if it's along the driveway, should be Nana, dwarf species, not the full species. Some of the sunshade looked like it might be struggling, like there was the Festuca right next to hosta, which probably aren't best species to put next to each other, depending on your conditions. What else? I think that was it for the most part. And then my only other comment was, it looked like in the concept plans, there was access allowed from the dog park into the stormwater area, but in the planting plan, there was a bunch of berberis planted right along that access, so that might be something to look at. And also, I don't know if dogs are a good idea for a stormwater area. It might, like, depending on the number of dogs, might start to experience some compaction and plant dieback, and, you know, just in terms of the function of the stormwater, permeability and whatnot might be a problem. Okay. Oh, and there's some euphorbia along in the dog park area also. And I think, you know, it's not toxic to everybody, but people do experience skin irritation due to the sap. So I love it, but it's, you know, can be a problem plant. I think that's it.
Thank you, Elizabeth. I tried to type those Latin names, but I failed miserably. So hopefully our note takers have, and if they haven't, they might reach out to you. Kareem?
Yeah, thanks, thanks for the team and addressing the comments from last time. I think the majority of the big comments were all addressed. I don't see any issues in supporting this to move forward.
Great, thanks, Kareem. Catherine?
Thanks so much. I'm pleased to see the different accessibility to the waterfront park. I think that's great. I do think that an overhang on the rear deck, the overhang that you have right now, is not sufficient in the rain. There's so much rain, and it'll be a really windy site, so that area will be pretty useless for folks. So I would highly recommend taking a look at that. And then the only other thing I had, I'll just say that I think planting the heather is also, I agree, that's not a good idea. It tends to struggle. There might be a lot of die-off. It's just a different climate that we have right now. And then also the Festuca glauca is another issue I have. It tends to rot and fall apart. So there just might be a lot of plant replacement down the way. So I recommend choosing different species. And that's all I've got.
Thank you very much. Sarah?
Yeah, I think that I didn't comment on the previous panel. I wasn't able to, but this the improvements are definitely noted. To begin with, in terms of the different materials on the front and backs of the buildings, I think that that's totally fine. They're in the same color family, and yeah, it's interesting and looks good. My comments are just around access into the off-leash dog park area, is to make sure that the gates going in are going to be accessible, operable with a closed fist. And you might want to consider having I'm assuming that the gravel pathway around the park is going to be hard packed gravel crush, which is an accessible surface. But if you could potentially extend that to the 2 benches on the southeastern corner of the park, because I just imagine that the gateways are going to get, heavily used, and probably, potential for puddles there. So it might just make it easier if somebody's walker or cane to get to those benches to watch their dog play in the park. And otherwise, yeah, I think that the project looks good. So thank you.
Thank you. And Jamie.
Yeah, I'm just note some good developments from the last what I can read from the last presentation. Just a few small comments on the revised elevations and color palettes. I just noticed that there's there's a 4th color present in a few of the color palettes, which is a kind of mustard color infill panel between ground floor and upper floor windows. I think it's maybe more successful in adjacent areas where there's the grey wrought iron colored fiber cement panel in between the windows, so that you read that sort of expression of a larger frame as a sort of a 2-window, 2-story, large kind of significant opening in itself. And the wrought iron color kind of relates to the black window frames a little bit, so it kind of reads as one mass. So that might be an easy opportunity to reduce some of the variation in the cladding. Yeah, because it's the colors are harmonized from front to back, but there's significant color changes in texture and so on. And if there's an opportunity to slightly restrain that, that might be a small one. And that's it.
Excellent, thank you. Yeah, I echo a lot of these comments. I think it's good to see the improvements. I also wasn't at the last meeting, so didn't get a crack at that one. My only one comment is just and something to consider and work through. But my guess is with the building permit being submitted, in 2021, you'll be looking at step 4 and to run your energy model on these sooner than later, because I think what we're finding is that step from step 3 to step 4 is really challenging, and so it's going to be important to ensure that these buildings can meet those requirements while still meeting your pro forma. So that's all the comments, unless there's anything else. Does anyone else have anything to add? Okay, I'll read out the potential recommendations.
Sorry,
yes?
Carlos, I have one more thing to add. Just on the grand stairs up to the Greenway Lane, is that if you can have some contrast on those stairs, that would be great. And if not contrast, then tactile lines if it's poured cement. Thanks.
Great comment. Okay, so I'll have to read these out. I think at least that's how it used to be, so I'll just continue that until I'm told differently. So the recommendation is A, that the advisory design panel supports the project and does not need to see this project returned for further review. B, that the advisory design panel supports the project in general and would like the applicant to work with staff to resolve the following recommendations. C, that the advisory design panel supports the project in general and would like the applicant to resolve the following recommendations in return to present the revised project to advisory design panel. Or D, that advisory design panel does not support the project for the following reasons. Do I have anyone moving an option? Maybe speak if you can, because I can't see everyone's screen at the moment.
Yeah, David here. I would maybe suggest B, because I think our comments are all quite concise and collected around 2 or 3 little things that were well noted.
Okay, does anyone want to second that? I see Kareem. Okay, Great. I guess before we do an all in favor, the items that I recorded from this conversation were a few comments around the usability of the deck space and wind cover and rain cover. Brent had a comment there about the pathway width. Some comments about the landscape generally, which I think need to be looked at by staff as is typical. And Jamie, I'm sorry, I missed your comment, and so if there's anything important, I apologize for not hearing it and writing it down. But is that generally the flavor? Anything major there that's missed?
To sum
Okay.
up, I think there was two, just like you could just sum up to say the color in the windows to be explored, which was Jamie's comment, and then accessibility in the dog park component.
Yeah, I think that was a great comment too, just about the species that are plant there and how they're going to deal with dogs. I know that dogs and stormwater can be a challenge, so it's not insurmountable, but just might need some additional thought. So okay, so that's recorded. Do I have everyone in favor of moving? Yes,
Carlos, you just asked for nay votes.
Yes. Anyone voting in opposition to B? I see no hands. Excellent. Okay. Look at that. 10 minutes before the timed item is complete. Wonderful. So I have a 10-minute break on our agenda here. Should we try to, let's see, when are the project team arriving? So recess 3:15 to 3:30. Staff, do we know if Centennial Way is in the wings, or are they not expected to come on until 3:30? I don't know if Asia's here.
Yeah, I'm here. Sorry, I just tried to turn on my video. I had given them the heads up they should be ready for 3, and it's the same architect, so I'll defer to you to make the call.
Okay, well let's come back together here at 3:15.
Okay,
And we'll kick it off from there.
thanks.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome back, everyone, to Advisory Design Panel. Next up is Development Permit 580, 1940 Centennial Way Phase 1. I'll throw it to the District Planner, Asia Phillip.
Thanks, Carlos. And for those new on the panel, my name's Asia Philp. I'm another planner with the district, and I'm presenting on DP 580. Today, I'll just do a super quick overview before I pass it back to Mark Blackwood, who you've heard from already today. So this is for a mixed-use development. It's located at 1940 Centennial Way. And if for those who are local to Squamish, they might remember this site as the Eagle Vista RV Resort or the Whistlepunk Hollow Mini Golf operation. So since those businesses closed and vacated the lands, the new owner has proceeded through a comprehensive development rezoning process, which has taken place. It started in 2018 and we just finished it in 2021. And this set the general siting, massing, and density parameters for the development. So today we're looking at the first of 3 phases of the development, and this one is located along the south side of Centennial Way. 3 buildings are proposed. The first one's an 80-unit, 5-story rental apartment. The second is a 2-story light industrial building, really 1-story with mezzanine space. And then the third building is a 4-story office building, which also contains a daycare facility at grade. So this site falls under Development Permit Area 3. That's our universal guidelines. We're seeking the panel's review of the proposal against these guidelines. And in particular, staff would like the panel's thoughts and comments on the materials and color palette proposed, and that's across all 3 buildings. We'd also like your comments on the adequacy of the weather protection again, across all 3 buildings, as well as the central amenity space located in between the buildings. And finally, we'd like your comments on the accessibility, again, throughout the development, but also focused on accessing that central amenity space. So those are the 3 items that I would love you guys to comment on. And of course, you can comment on anything else. And I'll pass it on to Mark Blackwood to go through his presentation, as well as we have DK Landscape Architect on the call. And just a reminder, Mark, that you have 10 minutes. Thanks.
Great, thanks. Thanks very much, Asia. I'm not sure, Brent, did you have an opening comment, or do you want me to dive right in?
I know Asia's covered it off for the most part. But yeah, I just wanted to say that, we've been working at this a little while. We're happy to be here today at ADP, hear your feedback. As Asia mentioned, we received rezoning this year in actually July 20th, which now we've submitted the first of 3 DPs, which we'll be submitting one for each of the 3 phases for the project. And our goal here is to, try to build a comprehensive community. It's interesting because we have different types of uses here, of course, with this first phase having the industrial, we call it an artisanal industrial building because it's going to be a light format, the office, rental apartments, below market housing, daycare, and then we're going to have subsequent phase townhomes at grade, and then phase across the street will be another mixed use building with some townhouses and condos and a freestanding pad building, retail oriented. So we're trying to, at the end of the day, have some familiarity with these 3 sites and have them somewhat synergize and bring some of that design acumen in and help tie them together. And we've sort of been working toward a Scandi industrial type feel. So you'll see that when Mark goes through on the materials that we're trying to utilize and bring through all 3 phases. So we're following, clean lines, strong design principles, trying to have a somewhat, a calm, sophisticated color palette and tie this into a nice community that's well-rounded, pedestrian oriented, connectivity. So, and at the same time, and I know it was mentioned in the earlier panel, step code 4. So trying to build with that as well. And there's a lot of constraints that fall into play with that in trying to achieve those levels. So we're happy to be here. I won't say any more. Let Mark take it away, and that's it.
Great, thanks, Brent. So I am still Mark Blackwood with Acoustics, and thanks very much, ADP. So we'll dive right in. As Asia mentioned, so here, these are the sites we're looking at. It's a 3-phase development. The application today is outlined in red, and then across the street, there's phase 2, which will be a mixed-use apartment building with townhomes, kind of on a common parkade. So that will be the next phase happening. And then immediately south to our site, we have a townhouse development that kind of abuts the Seven Peaks development further to the south here. We have some sensitive habitat to the east and some industrial lands to the west here. Overall, Centennial Way is designed to integrate a mix of uses, offering opportunities for live, work, and play. And as kind of mentioned, all 3 phases are really designed to sort of come together and provide, a real mix of amenities, daycare, supportable of a real livable community. The site we're talking about today is comprised of these 3 buildings outlined here. Owns phase 1, and in that phase we have the rental apartment building, the light industrial building here, kind of more adjacent to Centennial Way, which kind of bounds our site to the north, And then the building right here is our 4-story office building with also daycare at grade. And just kind of in the line work here, you can see the general arrangement of the townhomes that would be built in the future in phase 3, and kind of the mixed use apartment building and townhomes that are kind of on a common parkade in phase 2. One thing of note as well, part of the development agreement is a new pavilion on the waterfront dike. So here's the dike trail right adjacent to the Mangrove Channel. So zooming in a little bit more on phase 1 here. As mentioned, the site is comprised of the 3 buildings, and all 3 buildings sit on top of a common parkade structure. And because there is a grade change between the new Strata Road that's proposed along the southern edge here and Centennial Way as it rises up on top of the dike. So roughly you're dealing with about a story of grade change between Centennial Way and the new Strata Road to the south. So that allows us to nicely kind of slide a parkade structure kind of into the slope and wrap the building edges around the southern face of the parkade. So we're kind of obscuring that parking from view. And the 3 buildings are kind of composed to provide pedestrian permeability throughout the site and to define public outdoor spaces and opportunities for play, which Stephen from DKL will get into in more detail during the landscape segment. Again, just overview of the program: rental apartments, total of 80 units, 58 market rental units, 22 affordable units, and 8 adaptable units. In the light industrial building, which is kind of a high bay double height space with mezzanine, and as Brent mentioned, the idea is that this would house kind of more artisanal or kind of artisan type light industrial uses. So it has a real kind of animated and kind of interesting flavor along Centennial Way, with its supporting surface level parking and loading at grade. And then the office daycare building, as I mentioned, 4 floors with a daycare at grade, which spills out to the outdoor play area and kind of drop off for the daycare as well. Just a quick look at the site sections. So section A, the top one here, illustrates how the 5-story residential building wraps over the edge of the parkade. That's kind of inset into the slope. We have Centennial Way up here. So that's able to sort of nicely, work its way into the slope, and sort of a muse space in between the residential and light industrial. And then the other section here, section B, similar concept, where we have the office space, the muse, and then the light industrial in behind. This section here is taken through kind of where the parkade entrance would be, that kind of goes underneath all 3 of the buildings. So just a quick diagram, circulation wise, we have kind of vehicular traffic kind of coming around the perimeter of the site, and then this ties into the future strata roads that would serve as the townhomes to the south of us, the parkade entrance, the daycare drop off, and then kind of the looping kind of access here, which services the convenience parking for the light industrial. From a pedestrian and accessible perspective, we kind of color-coded where the accessible paths of travel are throughout the site, and where accessible building entries are located, and then also where there's sort of areas of non-accessibility, and that really has to do just with the grade change and it not being practical to provide any ramping. So generally speaking, the whole southern edge of the site is accessible with crosswalks and tie-ins to the townhouse development to the south. that path has an accessible sidewalk, which would be a new city or district sidewalk adjacent to Centennial Way, and kind of indicating here as part of this development would be a new signalized pedestrian crossing, which connects to the phase 2, the mixed-use building and townhomes on the north side of Centennial Way. The reason this section here is non-accessible, as you could note from the sections, were 10, 11 feet of grade change between this lower level and the central mews, so not practical from a ramping perspective. And likewise from the sides here, we're kind of dealing with similar grade change issues. But as we kind of make our way to the higher end of Centennial Way, we have a flat transition, which gives us access all along the front of the light industrial, down the side, and all throughout the pedestrian mews. So both the mews and kind of all entrance ways to each of the buildings are fully accessible. As we get into kind of the architectural language, as Brent mentioned, the idea of kind of having this nice contemporary industrial language was kind of front of mind.
Sorry to interrupt, Mark.
Sorry?
There must be a delay from my end. It's up that you're at 10 minutes.
Okay, I will move quickly here. So just the architectural language is kind of a real nice contemporary palette of the kind of the wood tones and sort of that dark metal. So really wanted to have that kind of language resonate through the various buildings. So a blow up of the entry of the residential building shows that combination of corrugated metal, wood tone siding, and kind of at sort of the entry area, this idea of using this kind of more kind of tumbled brick in that gray palette, which really complements well with the, kind of the wood tones and the grays that we're proposing. The overall elevation with its kind of tripart composition with the brick, the corrugated, and the wood tone, and then also introducing the wood tone materials along soffits and kind of articulated facades to accommodate kind of recessed decks, which provide weather protection to the outdoor space, and kind of the articulation of the roof lines. Just a perspective from the corner. So this would be kind of the outdoor daycare over here, and that pedestrian connection, which leads to the townhomes to the south. But kind of very much a kind of a strong base of the corrugated metal and kind of the warm tones that kind of resonate throughout the rest of the building, providing that kind of nice material palette we saw in the precedent images. On the east side, here we can kind of see the residential building, which wrapping over the parkade structure, the central mews, and the light industrial. So again, kind of continuing that consistency of color palette, I think creates a really nice contemporary look, and kind of really holds the buildings together from an architectural perspective. The light industrial, corrugated metal, we have accents of accent colors of signage banding and kind of, aluminum canopies, really kind of driving home this kind of industrial look, and kind of overhead high bay doors, which allow activities to kind of spill out into the street, artisan markets, things like that. I think it could be a really interesting edge. Then the overall building, which highlights the individual units and kind of the anchor unit at the end, which has also a nice opportunity for a patio. So just a couple other perspectives of that patio, metal canopies, board form concrete cladding in some of the base locations, and just another perspective from the other end of the parking lot. And then the office building continues that language as kind of the, kind of more the retail commercial portion. And then we have kind of this floating box on columns, which begins to define some of the covered outdoor space for the daycare as well at grade. A few more images of that. And then a corner shot of the office building daycare at grade and how that spills out to the outdoor play area, which kind of is nice, kind of beside the residential buildings. And here you can kind of appreciate the grade change as well that's present along that southern edge, kind of getting up to the courtyard. Okay, I'll hand it over to you, Stephen.
All right, I think I'm on. Hopefully everybody can hear me. Good afternoon, design panel. My name is Stephen Vincent. I'm with Durante Kirk. I'm a registered landscape architect. And it's a pleasure to be here to share the landscape with you. I know this landscape design with you. I know that we're a little bit behind on time, so I'll try to move fairly quickly through this. I think a great way to start though is just to kind of look at some of the imagery that's in front of you now, and you can consider this, I guess, a pictorial a description of the landscape rationale. So right at the outset of the design, we sat down with the team and thought about what kind of mood or what kind of character we want the spaces to feel like. And so, you know, the idea of natural vegetation fitting in with the context. Of course, it's a unique space. You're on the corridor with the dike edge there. So just looking at context, looking at primarily trying to fit as many natural materials as possible to kind of bring that in, so you can see the idea of the stone paving, the flagstone, recognizing that of course there's some limitations with accessibility over that. So we've tried to keep that fairly limited. Natural wood materials for fencing, for decking, even going so far as trying to bring in some of that crushed gravel, very fine gravel. Of course, also keeping in mind that accessibility is very important. So these are considered to be all accessible pathways and surfaces. But that idea, and then on the bottom left, for example, you know, some streamside habitat feeling. So the idea of sort of curvy pathways to try and break down the regularities of the building edges. And then in terms of play material as well, again, trying to bring those natural elements in. We've got to do a little bit more design development when it comes to the play structures, but this is the feeling that we're trying to capture. And just going back to what Brent said initially with the landscape, keeping in mind that this is one site of 3, and that we consider that the landscape amenities and elements are complementary to each space, so that you know, when you'll probably see the other sites coming up, so you'll see similarities, but we want to try and provide some variation as well in what we're providing for the residents and the people who are going to be living and working in these spaces. Let's move on then, Mark, to the next slide, which is the plan. And so really, again, just kind of going, you'll probably see as we go through this, some of the pictures coming to life here that you've just looked at. One thing I'll just review before we start zooming in a little bit more is that it's just looking around the perimeter of the site. And can I show my cursor in this? Or maybe Mark, you could just kind of point. So just around the perimeter of the site, you can see there's a substantial amount of trees. We've got over 100 trees on this site, newly planted trees around the perimeter. The darker green areas are shrub planting. The lighter green areas are grass areas, whether it's mowed lawn, manicured lawn, or lawn or grasses that can just be let grow a little bit longer to reduce maintenance requirements. Maybe what we could do now, Mark, is it possible to zoom in a little bit on the rental building there just to start with? So Mark mentioned there's a grade change. We're dealing with flood control levels. So, and there's a few sections that we can just jump into after we go through the plan. But essentially, there's a slight grade change between the sidewalk and the patios. You can see the patios, we really focused on that privacy. So although we have privacy screens between the patios, you can see there's a very generous amount of planting with small trees in each yard. We set back the entrance to make sure that there's a nice gradual, less than 5% slope. It ends up being about 3%. So nice gradual slopes for people in wheelchairs or perhaps pushing strollers. And we've really focused as well on providing a lot of seating opportunities, opportunities for bike racks. So this is one example in front of the residential area. So moving clockwise, I guess, towards the office building, towards the daycare, the drop off. Again, trees become really important for shade here. there was some discussion earlier about covered area. So we consider that trees are an important part of providing shade for the site. Having said that, of course, it takes a few years for trees to grow and have that level of coverage for canopy, but that was part of our strategy. Then keep continuing moving over in front of the office building and up around the perimeter of the site. Again, lots of buffer planting, incorporating conifer trees as part of the tree palette. We don't have a lot of conifers, but we've been very strategic in where we place them. And then moving up around the industrial building, again, continuing on with a very strong edge condition on the multi-use pathway trail along Centennial Way. Mostly grass up around the industrial site, just more practical in terms of maintenance. Just there's a lot of truck traffic and movement around there, but I think we've been pretty successful in incorporating and breaking up those expansive asphalt areas with tree and grass locations. So then moving around to the east side, Mark, I know we're kind of moving around here quite quickly, where the landscape, part of the landscape drops down on the sidewalk around back to the front. And the other part, as Mark explained, is the accessible route, which comes in and along the side of the industrial building, and then you end up in the Muse, which we can talk about now. So the Muse is quite an interesting space. It's very long and linear. The idea was that you can see the organic form, so contrasting the linear edges of the building, so you can see the slightly curving pathways that we really tried to work at bringing that feeling in. The wood deck on the right hand side, we have these enlarged nice lounge chairs, so almost becomes a bit of a play element for kids or even for adults just to hang out on. We're using because this is on a slab, we want to try and avoid using any raised walls, so we're mounding soil in localized areas to allow for tree planting, which we can look at the section D later on. Moving a little bit on into more of the central area where we have slightly more programming. So we've got a yoga platform. There was a talk about covering these spaces, and I'll look forward to hearing some of the comments from panel. It was discussed, and I think we're generally open to the idea. However, I think there's something really nice about being able to be out in the open underneath the sky. So I think there's a real trade-off that we've got to look at there. And that's kind of the one thing we've been discussing. So anyway, just moving on, one of the goals too was to provide a lot of like intimate space and play areas. So for example, the central, there's a little lawn area that's somewhat enclosed. It's a lawn where people can kind of gather and enjoy different spaces for different feeling different events happening. So the larger space for kicking the ball around, frisbee playing, etc. And then more of the central area associated with the indoor amenity space, a picnic area with a large harvest community table, play area, and then we have what we're calling the bring your own barbecue space, where we're providing a table where people can a lot of people have barbecues, portable barbecues. You just come bring it down there and just enjoy the space together. Again, a wood deck to kind of break that up with a tree in the deck, hoping that becomes a nice shade element in a few years. And then just below that, we have little breakout spaces, maybe hard to see at this level, but with some lounge chairs where people can gather, a play hut for the kids. And we talked a lot about the play surface for this. Right now, we're showing it as a rubber, like a safety surface rubberized element, but it could be engineered wood fiber. Wood fiber just takes a lot more maintenance, so I think there's some practical considerations that we need to make here. And then moving on over to the commercial outdoor space, gets a little bit more rectilinear in terms of forms. There's a slight grade change from the commercial building down to the plaza, but lots of opportunities for sitting for people. You can have an outdoor meeting. We have little landscape islands that break up little curvilinear forms, organic forms that break up that space a little bit, and lots of trees as well in that area. So again, you kind of got that feeling of being surrounded by nature. I know I've gone through this very quickly, and I know there's maybe some clarifications afterwards, but let's jump over to the planting design next. The next slide, please, Mark. I won't say too much about the planting in detail, but what I will say is that we're looking at we're proposing a fair amount of native plants, also adaptable plants, and most of the plants are drought tolerant once they're established. There will be some irrigation here, which is just because it's on slab, it's hard to avoid that. But the goal would be to reduce the amount of water usage as much as possible. There might be some slight adjustments. I know that this planting in Squamish is to be bear friendly. That'd be not attracting bears. I think there might be a couple plants on there that have berries on them, which are the things that typically bears look for. So unfortunately, we try and incorporate plants that birds enjoy as well, and they often like the same types of plants. So we're going to have to look more closely at what that plant palette is. But I think by and large, the idea is that it's got a very kind of naturalized look about it, natural plants. So these are the type of plants you might see as you're walking around, on the trails around throughout Squamish. Anyway, let's move on to the next one, which is just a quick review of some of the sections. And starting on the top left of the screen, this goes back to the residential, the rental unit. Just shows a grade change of about 18 inches between the sidewalk. Shows the separation with the trees. Moving on to the section DB, which is basically just shows a section through another part of the landscape. Section C is on the right-hand side of the cat just jumped up here. The right-hand side of the industrial building, showing the grade change there. And then section D is through the Muse, and that shows generally how we're treating the mounding of the planting for the trees. The play area below that, pretty flat throughout there, but just with a nice variation of materials across there. And then the bottom left is the commercial area and the sorry about that. And there's a trellis, open trellis system there with the seating in that area. And the last one is on the Centennial Way with the multi-use path. And then there's a slight grade change at that point as you get up closer to the top of the hill. And then that's where Mark was explaining how the accessibility path would happen. So you come up Centennial Way, multi-path, and then through that plaza and then into the Muse space. So yes, spoke very quickly. Sorry about that, but I know time is of the essence. So thank you for your time, and please, if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Thank you very much. Massive project to get done within 10 minutes, so appreciate the attempt there. Okay, everyone, we're going to go reverse order. Let's start with questions. Jamie, you are first.
First question, the percentage of family units, so sort of 2-bedroom plus, is it around 40% or so, or
so
out on the data sheet?
Yeah, so 2 bedrooms. Apologize, don't have the number here. I'm just adding it up. There's about 43 1-bedrooms. So the remainder are 2 plus. So it's about you're close to 50%. Yeah.
Secondly, I have a question about daylight for the interior corridor in building 1 rental apartment. Do you have a plan to glaze your exit stairs, or is there any other source of natural daylight to your interior circulation?
Yeah, currently on our elevations, on the exit stairs, we are showing some glazing at the various landings, just to bring in some amount of natural light. So kind of moving around and using those stairs from just an active transportation perspective is a little bit more inviting.
And is there any plan to glaze the partition between the exit stair and the corridor itself to get some natural daylight into the circulation space?
No, not at this time.
Okay. Got a question about strategy for summer comfort to avoid overheating. Is there mechanical cooling planned for, I guess, either building 1 or building 3 in particular?
Haven't got into that level of detail. I don't believe cooling is anticipated for the rental apartment at this time. Um, the design itself is aimed to kind of, use exaggerated overhangs and as much kind of passive shading as we can, but not, no air conditioning at this point.
Okay. And then accessibility to the picnic and play area and the community backyard for residents in building 1. If you have mobility issues and you want to go from your apartment on the upper levels, you come down the elevator, what's your route through?
Yeah, so the access to kind of the outdoor area is currently through the indoor amenity room. That's located right on the corner, immediately adjacent to the picnic and play area.
Okay. And lastly, I have a question about the dimensions of the canopies at your light industrial building number 2, the entrance canopies.
What is the projection?
Yeah, projection and projection, I guess, is particularly.
Yeah, you're looking at about 6 feet. So from the graphic here, you can see the door swing, including the recess. You're looking at about a 6-foot projection. So providing a good amount of coverage at those entry points.
And then lastly, bike storage for residents and general storage within the parkade.
That's correct. Yeah.
So is it anticipated? Is there a separate bike room, or is it anticipated that people will opt to use their storage locker for bike storage in the parkade?
Yeah. So the idea is to kind of we're using kind of individual locker systems where folks can put their bikes within a locker versus a common bike room. I think from a market point of view, the perception is most people kind of want that security, especially with the cost of bikes and e-bikes and all of that kind of thing these days.
That's it for me at the moment. Yeah.
Thank you. Sarah?
Hi. Yeah, so can you just clarify in the drawings between the plaza area and the what seems to be gravel pathway that connects to the wooden deck? It says local stone paving. Is that the crush, or is there separate paving there, or is that meant to be the trellis that's going to be above the that entry into the plaza?
Want to take that, Stephen? This is the trellis, this portion here.
I can't see your cursor. Oh, there, it's just very small. Okay. And you're suggesting that the indoor amenity space that's going to remain open and people are going to be able to access a security system to get into the building back from that picnic area back into the building number 1?
Yeah, I guess all the hardware hasn't been sorted yet, but I imagine there'll be some fob system throughout the building to sort of gain access to the various common amenities. So indoor amenities, bike rooms, garbage rooms, things like that.
Oh, okay. And it seems that there's only 1 accessible parking stall, and you've got 8 adaptable units. Is that correct? That there's 1 accessible parking stall in the underground parking?
No, that we'd be meeting the bylaw. I think in staff's review, we were short by 1, which we're going to be kind of rectifying, but there would be the required accessible stalls in the parkade.
Okay. Do you have any idea where they're going to be located? Because they're not on the drawings.
Okay. Yeah,
And then
I don't have that one in front of me, but we would aim to locate them as close to the elevators as we can.
okay, and then in the surface parking for the light industrial building, there's no accessible parking in that parking lot. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay, that probably will need to be revisited because you
Yeah,
can't
it's a good
get
point.
into the underground parking.
Yeah.
Mark, can I jump in and respond on the accessible parking stalls? So
Yeah.
we haven't discussed this yet, and by my count, you're short 4 stalls. And so I was going to discuss making sure that there was an accessible stall located close to the entrance of each of the 3 buildings.
Okay.
As well as some in the underground for the residential apartments. So that's something that we have to improve and work on.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean,
sounds
because
good.
I mean, certainly, like, I mean, it's not to say that of those adaptable units that everybody will be a wheelchair user, but you should be prepared to have adequate parking for people who would be using those units. That's all my questions at the moment. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sarah. Catherine?
Unmute. Hi. Okay. Questions. So along the north side of building, oh, sorry, let's start with building, the industrial building. I'm noticing it looks like patches of grass with a tree. Have you guys considered plantings versus some kind of turf surface? Shrubs, native plants?
Hi, yeah, this is Stephen here. We did talk about it, and I think just from a practical point of view, just with all the activity around there, we decided for grass, but absolutely, I think including some shrub material in that area would add certainly from a visual point of view, and possibly in the long run reduce maintenance. Mowing grass is not maintenance free by any stretch, so so certainly there's an opportunity there to incorporate some plants in.
Okay. And that would, I would echo the same consideration for along the north side of the industrial building. Just seems like slots of grass that are kind of in between buildings facing north.
Facing on like towards Centennial Way.
Exactly.
Yeah, and we're happy to look at that. I think it does help provide kind of achieve some of our overall goals. With trying to kind of have that shrub presence of shrub planting. So we'll definitely take that into consideration.
Okay, and then I won't ask the same question, but I'm having a similar question around along the northwest side as well, where I see kind of massive lawn, which is a monocrop. So just again, are you considering again drought tolerant native species, stormwater management, that kind of stuff?
Yeah.
Or are you firm on your grass? Okay, and then the other question I had was, so this entryway that comes off of Centennial Way in between building 2 light industrial and the other industrial building, along the north side of building 2, I've noticed there's no kind of tree cover or anything to break up the concrete. I know it's tight in there, but would you consider, or would you consider reducing the size of the building so that we can have some, once again, trees, plants, things to break up the concrete, increase stormwater management, and also reduce the heat dome effect?
That's a good question. I mean, because it's an industrial use, there's I think there's a lot of requirement for access there. So we really, we'd have to look at that. It's hard to say at this point. I'll let Mark and Brent add to that. But from a landscape point of view, happy to do that. But at the same time, it might contravene in what the whole goal of that whole space is to start with. So
yeah. And then have you guys, in terms of the cooling system, it's step 4. Is there requirements for heat? Have you guys considered heat pumps for heating and cooling?
Yeah, so there'll definitely need to be that kind of consideration of the mechanical system once we start looking at the energy modeling, just to sort of see where where we need to kind of amp up, whether it's building envelope or mechanical system. So I think a lot of that is still to be defined.
Gotcha. And then just in terms of the other lawn surfaces, I mean, I think it's worthwhile to have durable surfaces that people can play on. And I noticed you said something about grasses. Would you consider things like the turf and some of the lawn alternatives that have pollinator species for those areas, or for all grassy areas, in fact?
Yeah. So are you thinking of like this more the Central Muse area, or just anywhere in general?
Thinking for everything that's grass, have you guys considered just
Yeah, absolutely.
and using pollinator, something that's got enough of that you can still mow it and you can still have, a surface that's playable, a pond?
Yeah, I think that it's interesting. I mean, it comes down to maintenance and how much you want to let things grow. And, I think absolutely we're, I think there's a lot of opportunity here for pollinators in those grass areas. So it's definitely something we'll consider. We do have a fair bit I mean, a lot of the plants right now, we're trying to focus on that. Of course, there's always a balance between, as I said, being bear smart, although pollinator plants typically aren't well, some of the flowering ones are. So we need to obviously take that into consideration, but it's a good comment or a question. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. That's all I have for you. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Kareem?
Yes, a couple of quick questions. Was it the district's desire to lay out the three buildings in this way? Meaning, is the apartment building there for a reason? Or vice versa, is the light industrial there for a reason?
Yeah, I'm happy to speak to this one, Kareem. So through that comprehensive development process, the footprints and the general density and massing of these buildings was thought through to actually a high level of detail. So basically the placement of the buildings, how tall they are, and what we're seeing now is what was secured through the rezoning process. So there's not a ton of opportunity to do any massive adjustments in that regard.
Okay. My second question is regarding the light industrial building. I can see doors to the back, to the community backyard. Is the intent that these would be like breweries and things that people can access from both sides?
Yeah, so I think there was, there was a desire to sort of make sure that the backside of the industrial building feels not like a back, as much as possible, to sort of make sure that there's a nice relationship between the elevation of the light industrial building and some of the outdoor amenity spaces. So I think providing opportunities for access into the rears is sort of a key design feature there. In terms of a tenant like a brewery or something like that, there certainly is opportunities for something like that. That was at the in the design stage, kind of this anchor at the end was almost seen as sort of that ideal location, right? It has the west facing patio, probably some view opportunities, so it would be kind of a nice unit for that type of use.
Got it. I think this is it in terms of questions from me. Thank you.
Thank you. Elizabeth?
Hi, I don't have any questions.
Okay, Brent?
Great. Thanks, guys. Thanks for the presentation. This might be a similar kind of question to what Kareem was getting at, but the layout of the parking lot for the industrial building, was there any other layouts that were kind of considered? I think my understanding, the hydro right of way is something that won't be developed, and just wondering if there was other sort of thinking about activating the front of this street a little bit more, having the parking more facing that hydro right of way, anything like that was ever explored.
Yeah, so I think when we were doing the initial site planning, lots of iterations were explored. There are, because this is part of a dike, there are some restrictions in terms of what we can kind of build kind of closer to Centennial Way as well. Part of the rationale was to create a little bit of separation between the, if we were to move, say, parking to the other side of the light industrial and push the building a bit closer, trying to limit, crossover between kind of residential traffic versus kind of this more kind of commercial. And I think having the parking, it's only a single double loaded lane, so it's not a lot of depth before you kind of see the face of the building. And there was early envisioning sessions about, well, given the types of uses that are envisioned in the light industrial, the opportunities for kind of spill outs or kind of artisan market, taking over some of that parking, during some different events or things like that, really allows this to kind of operate a bit more in a flexible way, where these kind of uses can kind of expand out onto this kind of widened, sidewalk essentially, or even into the parking. You get a couple of food trucks parked out there or something like that. So.
Okay. I had a question about how many daycare spaces that was included, the number of.
What was the number of daycare spaces?
Yeah.
Oh, it's for 25 children.
25 children. Okay. And then I had a question about, are the apartments on the ground floor north facing, do they have ground floor access? So like maybe there's entrances or.
Yeah, so each of, sorry if I scroll down here, each of the ground floor units have an at-grade patio, which is slightly elevated above the sidewalk. So there's a couple steps, just kind of negotiating a bit of grade change there. Some of that has to do with the flood control level in the area. But each of those units will have kind of nice, generous patios at the ground level with direct access.
Great, that's all the questions for you. Thanks.
Thank you, David.
Yeah, just a little bit of an obtuse, probably question for Mark, but with such separate uses for these buildings, why the strong need to tie the buildings all together in terms of materials?
Oh, from a material palette point of view?
Yeah.
I think part of it is kind of arriving at this sort of precinct of buildings that kind of have that kind of industrial flavor kind of tied throughout. We did introduce some of those kind of the red colored panels that kind of distinguish a little bit more the light industrial and office building. We don't kind of repeat that into the rental apartment building. But really wanted that kind of cohesive look. I think a lot of those precedent images with that corrugated metal, those wood tones, just they just look fantastic, and really wanted to kind of celebrate that aesthetic.
Okay, perfect. Do subsequent phases do they have daycares in them as well?
No daycares. The one to the south is a purely townhouse project. And then the other development on the other side is mixed-use apartment with retail at grade. Okay,
and then my question was, any consideration on beautifying the rear of the industrial use from A2302? It does kind of look like a flat wall with some solid doors on it.
I think we wanted to balance a little bit, understanding that with a light industrial type use, there will be a need just functionally for a back, right? So I think naturally there is going to be a level of some solid to the back of the building to ensure that for storage of goods and all of that type of thing, they are going to need a back of house space. But I think as I was noting, still making sure that we have doors and direct access to the muse. So there is opportunities for, people that work in those to, come out and enjoy lunch in that community backyard and still have those access points.
Okay. And then I think Jamie kind of touched on it, but any consideration for like a full length walkway along that industrial space?
Sorry, can you clarify the question?
Was there any consideration given for a full length overhang on the industrial units?
Oh, okay. Yeah, off the front. So we did look at that. I think part of the challenge is all of those light industrial buildings also have kind of high bay overhead doors. So your canopies also end up, going quite high. So what we did was we relied on kind of the overhang of the shed roof up top as providing some weather protection, but really concentrated the cover just at the front entries because I think your canopy would be up so high over those high bay overhead doors that you'd have to come out pretty far to sort of make that effective.
Perfect. Yep, that's all my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, on to me. As drawn, you've got a bunch of roll-up doors, which in a typical industrial unit would be used for access by vehicles, but it doesn't appear that there's any actual vehicle access onto the sidewalk. Is that intentional?
Yeah, so again, the idea is keeping the industrial uses a bit lighter, so I think a lot of these will function almost like storefronts to some degree. So really the idea is off the three loading spaces here that, overhead doors can be opened and pallets of goods can be kind of brought into spaces, but not actually pulling, vehicles actually into the doors.
Okay, and what's the width of the sidewalk on average between?
It varies. I would say at the widest point here, you're probably in the, sort of 15-foot range, going down to, 10 or 12 feet.
Gotcha. And do you have a wider range of uses in that CD zone than a typical light industrial, like in our business park?
Yeah, the land use agreement kind of spells out that the types of uses can only be kind of more light industrial of kind of this more artisanal nature to really kind of promote kind of a good mix of units that a good mix of tenants that kind of support the vision that we're looking for here.
Okay, and is the building envisioned to be wood construction then? Of the industrial building?
Still exploring that a little bit. I think we're exploring kind of wood and steel right now. I think with the fluctuation of materials, it's a little bit hard to kind of nail down right now. So we're exploring both options.
Okay, and then so when you have a board form concrete as a material, that's like a panelized, like a cementitious panel with a faux board form concrete, or are you actually proposing concrete that's board formed?
So we're looking at a Ceraclad product, if you're familiar with that. So it's kind of a high end fiber cement product it's more of a ceramic coated finish, and it has that board form look, which is quite nice.
Okay, and then there's a lot of, in your present imagery, there's a lot of real wood and steel, but I notice on the materials board, a lot of it is faux wood. It appears to be faux wood. Can you maybe talk about that rationale a little bit?
Yeah, like always, it's a balance between kind of getting the look and the warmth of wood that everyone loves, and kind of balancing the maintenance and fire resistance. I know, given the summer that we've just had, there's I think even some more recent bylaws that have been approved in Squamish that kind of having fire resistant materials on buildings is becoming increasingly important. But I think trying to get that wood look and still getting that durability as well is kind of what we're going for here.
Okay. And then kind of switching over to the residential building now, it is a question that was posed to us by staff, but what are the depths of your balconies for that residential building?
I'll have to go up here. I believe we're in, it's not on this one. I believe the depths are kind of 5 to 8 feet, dependent on the balcony. Most of them are 8 feet because of the, we are kind of recessing the units, as you can see on the ground floor here. So there's sort of the recess plus the extension of the balcony as well. So generally speaking, we're in the 8-foot range.
Okay, and similarly, the amenity room was a discussion point, but I don't really recall many details on the indoor amenity room. Is there anything that you can share with us about that?
Yeah, so the program right now, we don't have all the detail, but it's envisioned to be essentially a community room, so an area where there'd be, a kitchenette, kind of harvest table, gathering area, lounge, really a hangout room and party room for the residents, and then giving them that spill out space to the picnic and barbecue area.
Gotcha. Okay, a couple more here, sorry. Those 22 units, do they fall under the 22 units of affordable housing, do they fall under the District of Squamish's perpetual affordable housing policy?
Asia, I believe they are. Okay.
I can speak to this. We're in the process of negotiating the housing agreement through the DP process. So nothing's been finalized yet, but you can bet that we'll be aiming for that perpetually affordable housing policy to hit that mark.
Great. Does the yoga deck have a cover to it, or is it just the deck?
Yeah, currently there was no cover at this. We did talk about it, but we felt that, there's something really nice about having an open sky too. I understand though cover is sometimes more practical for shade and rain. But right now, as it stands, it's just an open deck.
Okay. And last one, sorry. For your materials, it looks like the majority of the faux wood is hardy, but maybe I'm wrong about that. Can you just maybe go into a bit more detail about the type of cladding you're thinking about for that faux wood?
Yeah, maybe I'll go to that materials board. Yeah, so if we look at the residential building, essentially all of the wood cladding is envisioned to be, sort of a hardy or kind of fiber cement product. And then some areas like entries looking to incorporate kind of more like heavy timber elements at kind of entry canopies and things like that. But again, from a durability perspective, we're proposing kind of the hardy products. But picking a color that doesn't best portrays sort of the warmth of wood that we're looking for. I know staying away from a lot of the really yellow and orangey colors that hardy sometimes has that are kind of dead giveaways that it's fake. So some of these kind of warmer, more muted colors in the hardy range are a lot more convincing and sort of a lot more attractive in my eyes.
Okay. Any more questions, or should we move on to comments? Okay, Jamie, take it away for comments, please. And just a reminder to everyone, staff are looking for feedback on materials and color palette, adequacy of weather protection, central amenity space, accessibility, and any other comments you may have.
So just with this slide in mind, I think it's a pretty restrained color palette, which works quite well considering the volume of the building steps in and out. There's quite a lot of variation in planes. There's significant roof overhang, so there's opportunities for big shadow casting. And then I think it's actually quite effective, the sort of cornice or connecting overhang that's between balconies on level 5 to create a sort of a suggestion of almost like a recessed change in material at the top level without having to adopt the complexity of actually stepping back a wall and ruining your mechanical stacks and so on. I do think that in terms of bike storage, that having a sort of a commuter style bike room where people that are just want to get on their bike and go and avoid a car trip to go to the supermarket is a helpful thing. Might not be a place for every person, but I know from sort of experience that there's obviously the secure bike storage is really important. A lot of expensive mountain bikes and so on in Squamish, but also to let people really avoid car trips, you need a convenient. You don't want to have to uncover a mountain bike from a tarp or to go to a store, and you want a quick place for a commuter bike to get going. So if any sort of leftover space emerges in your parking layout, I think it's a good thing to look at. And the easier it is in a shorter distance it is to come down the elevator and out, obviously the more widely people's commuter bikes get used. I do think that the earlier you can make a strategy about your sort of summer comfort, the better. You can see pretty good balcony overhangs here on the south for, I guess it's a bedroom window and then a door from the side entering the balcony. There's some fairly large living room windows there, so I would definitely encourage you to make a decision about whether you're doing more passive or active solutions for controlling summer comfort. There's quite a lot of south-facing units that just have a single aspect to south, so I think in a step 4 level building with additional insulation and so on, it's something to really pay attention to, that you could get localized overheating, and it's sort of 40% of the units have a single south-facing aspect. And even without a sort of heat dome effect, I think you could still get some overheating. So solution could be, you're looking at your overhangs, or being quite aggressive with ground level planting of deciduous trees so that you get some shading at ground level, shading from above with your roof overhangs, individual shading elements on some windows. But I think it's important to make a decision. Some of those solutions have some bearing on design panel review. Some are mechanical solution perhaps, but I think that's important to sort of bring forward because I think there's a potential problem there. I do think that the accessible route to the outdoor amenity through the indoor amenity is maybe a little bit problematic. I think it kind of relies on hardware and opening hours of indoor amenity, everything kind of being harmonized over time, or else you'll sort of restrict access at certain times a day to that unit. I think, ideally it would be great if the elevator had, there was an elevator lobby where the elevator is that had access through to the north at that level. It's, it's a pretty simple route from where the elevators are located if they were reconfigured to provide direct access from the elevator, and the potential for some natural light to the middle of the floor plan might come from that. Other comments? I don't find the individual canopies at the light industrial problematic. I think they're reasonably sized. I think there's a fairly small number of units, so I think the amount of traffic along the frontage of that is not, equivalent to a large street downtown Squamish. I think it'll be a lot of in and outs from door to car, and at least the canopies are big enough for someone to step out, adjust their jacket and umbrella and everything out of way of accessing the front door. So I think they're appropriately sized, and it's good that they're nice and low, especially if there's sort of wind-driven rain. So I think requiring them to be the full length and the clash with the overhead doors can maybe be avoided. Anything else? That's about it. Yeah.
Thank you, Jamie. Sarah?
Sorry, it took me a minute to get off of mute. Yeah, I'll just echo Jamie's sentiment about the access to the picnic and play area. It's not a good solution to go through the amenity room because you should have access to that 24/7. And if, also given the fact if there are, events being held in the amenity room, you might be uncomfortable to access it that way, and it's otherwise a ridiculous route to go all the way around. I also wanted to comment that the harvest table needs to be extended on either end to accommodate a wheelchair. I would be cautious with the wood decking between the play area and the bring your own barbecue, just to make sure it's not a slippery surface and there's no tripping hazard there that wheeling between those spaces. I would be cautious about using the crushed gravel at the top of even though it is a very gentle ramp, just there's going to be overflow of gravel coming down there. It just is a bit messy, so whether or not you can extend the paving to the end of the ramp might be a remedy. There needs to be a van overheight parking, surface parking that is available for the light industrial building, because you won't be able to park in the underground. You know, definitely going to have to come up with some solutions for the accessible parking, because, you know, regardless of whether or not somebody needs the additional space, it's highly likely that you're going to have people with mobility disabilities and that can't walk that far. So you'll have to be able to provide some flexibility for those people. Make sure that all of the windows are going to be at a viewable height from a seated position. And then I would discourage the flagstone. I just see it as a big tripping hazard for even somebody who's ambulatory. You know, I appreciate that you're going for a particular look, but given the volume of traffic and that's going to be a shaded area for people to sit, if you can't get over those flagstones while you're watching your kid play, that might be problematic. Yeah, and otherwise, I appreciate the restraint with the color. I'm just not convinced that it's doesn't become a bit monotonous, but you know, that's not my area of expertise. And yeah, I think that's all my comments at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Catherine?
Hi, thanks. So I guess my comments, recommendations are to consider replacing turf with some kind of bee turf. It'll provide pollination as well as keep things greener and require and certainly when there's water restrictions, which we're likely to have most summers going forward, we won't have the scorched earth look of turf. I'd recommend plantings, shrubs, pollinator species, native plants along Centennial Way. And what else? I think for the yoga space, the reality of rain and sun is that it'll be much more usable if there is a roof. So I'd recommend that covered for sure. I want to echo what Jamie said about bike storage. It's really, I think some kind of bike room needs to be front and center, because otherwise it will be really hard for people to jump on their bike and go places. It has to be easy, easy to get the bikes in and out. And then, you know, you could explore other options in terms of how to make it more secure for people's high-end mountain bikes. I heard a story of a building where they created bike storage, but you had to take your wheel off in order to park your bike. And that happened in Squamish. So just something to consider. I think that's really important. What else? The size of the deck. I believe a 5-foot deck will not accommodate someone. I just think a 5-foot deck in depth. I know you said some of them were 8, but I think 8 is the minimum in order to really make it usable space. And then I guess the other thing for me is that the space in between the light industrial and the industrial parking, I like the mixed use. I think it's great. I just think it's tight in there, and the community backyard is a great space, but there's going to be a lot of people using that space. So if there was ways to, I know that it's industrial at the back there, but there's, I think that you were saying something about like parking a food truck back there, potentially, you know, spilling into the parking lot. So yeah, I don't know if it's even possible, but to widen that and have more trees and shrubs and break up the concrete, create more filtration, and just be able to use that space in different ways. And that's all I have. So much.
Thank you. Kareem?
Yes, I wanted to thank Mark and the team for the presentation. Um, in terms of the color palette and the materials, I support them. I think they're chic. I think they're people have been saying restrained. I like the color palette. Um, uh, Maybe I would recommend maybe looking at the specifically the apartment building and maybe try to emphasize those three towers and maybe have them be wrapped around with a different color or material and maybe it'll create more verticality and kind of minimize that horizontal banding. Um, it seems that some of the balconies, their proportions are pretty squarish and the windows are squares and there seems to be a lot of punching and maybe that was the intent, but I feel like maybe if we look at the proportions of windows and balconies, it'll start to create a bit of a rhythm. Other than that, I think the colors and materials are the appropriate choice. My only sort of comment is that it's a shame. I wasn't personally involved in the rezoning process, and I don't know if I could have been involved, but it seems to me that this community backyard is going to be always in the shade. The choice of putting the apartment building there, 3 stories taller, it's going to be always shading that. It's just looking at the orientation relative to north. So, I would have had it the other way around maybe. And if the intent also was for the light or industrial to be of artisanal nature and have maybe food making, establishments and beer trucks and breweries and things, maybe had that building been on the other side, it would have served phase 2 even, and people could sort of, it sort of bridges both the apartment building, which would be to the north of it, and the townhouses and the residential to the south of it. But I guess this is a moot point now. Other than that, I have no comments. I think it's nice and interesting, and thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Hi. Okay, few things. One, I love the native plant palette. I think you guys did a great job. Lots of species on there that you don't usually see. So that's great. I love the material palette for the buildings, but I wouldn't mind seeing a bit more pizzazz in the colors. It's, I think one of the kind of unique things about Squamish is that industrial heritage here and that history, and when it starts to look a bit aged, it's a bit funky and kind of welcoming and warm, and I'm not quite seeing that here. I think a good example that probably has been used to death, but that I still love, is at the end of 2nd Street downtown in that kind of light industrial, semi-industrial area. So maybe some inspiration there. Couple of things. I know it's a grade change and it's a big one and it's tricky, but as you can see, being a parent, just about, yeah. Coming to pick up kids at the daycare and then not having any really easy access to the play area, especially if I'm a grandma or if I have a stroller, I find that a bit challenging. So I don't know if there's a solution, but it would be nice to see something. And then, what was the last part? Oh, the yoga deck maybe could be multifunctional with a roof as a stage or some other kind of use just to jazz up that area too. And then just a random idea, maybe some of the space issues that we've kind of been talking about for the light industrial area could be resolved by, and this would, this is a fairly big change, so I'm just brainstorming, is kind of bumping it north a little bit, making that parking lot area more of a utility area and incorporating some of those like food truck areas or patio areas into the community backyard. Just brainstorming again, just because it's fun to like incorporate, you know, those eating areas with the planting and with more access to seating and people and play. You know, I think that's kind of what makes multi-use developments interesting, is where you can have those overlaps. Obviously, if they become problematic, you don't want that, but maybe there's a way to buffer those two things. Okay, I think that's it. Thanks.
Thank you, Brent.
Great. Yeah, thanks for the presentation, and excited to see yeah, an interesting multi-use, mixed-use development. I think that some sort of covered area in the community backyard would be worth adding or exploring. There's a lot of rain as we see here, and then sun in the summer as well. If there is shade, you know, the midsummer sun is pretty hot if you're out there playing with your kids, like a bit of shade. I think that there could be potential for challenges with the daycare pickup drop-off loop. 25 parents coming at the same time. 3 spaces is enough, probably, but I deal with a lot of school challenges, and I could see there being some circulation challenges. And so I would encourage looking for ways to encourage people to come on bikes, see more and more kids on the back of their bike for pickup and drop off. And if there's a way to provide a more bike-friendly connection to the front of the daycare, that would be something worth exploring. And then just thinking like the materiality and the look. I also think that it works. My one hesitation is sort of second presentation in a row with a really prominent corrugated metal finish, and just want to ensure that we're not moving toward something that is dated and yeah, sort of a timestamp of the time that we're in, or that's a go-to material for a lot of good reasons, but ensuring that it is not the only material that is being used. I think that there maybe is an opportunity for a bit of color, public art. It looks like there's a concrete wall behind the play area where the daycare is, and I think that a splash of color or some way to kind of widen that area would be fun and create a bit of excitement in a place sort of connecting the office to the residential. And then I think that the back end of the industrial building, similar to what was kind of mentioned in the question period, I think that something to make that a little bit more inviting. It's currently a pretty, yeah, kind of boring, stale looking wall. And I think that something needs to be done there to make that a little bit more engaging and create a space that's comfortable and warm for people to be in. Thanks.
Thank you, David.
Hi, yeah, overall, yeah, fairly dense site. Super positive for me to see mixed use development in the kind of truest sense of the word. Regarding the materials, I hear what everyone else is saying, but I kind of think there's a missed opportunity to really make these kind of uses speak independently, so that people know that the industrial building is the industrial building, apartment, et cetera. Variety is the spice of life, as they say. And I'm just concerned that with all of the subsequent phases proposed, that we don't have this kind of homogeneous development that, you know, we can all drive past and we know that that was one developer who did that entire area. I see no reason why they couldn't look quite different. This would actually add a bit to the fabric of the development, and kind of create these unique streetscapes. I think overall the massing of the buildings is quite fine. I like how they appear differently, you know, from a massing standpoint. And there's some key little features that try to, you know, show them as different, but I see no reason why the side of the light industrial building has to have the same material as the apartment building. I think the apartment building looks quite large and overbearing, but I put that largely down to the surrounding buildings being of a similar style. So it kind of, you know, looks like one big development really to me. Enjoy the forms, really great to see the daycare added. And then same as a couple of other people and Brent have said as well, like a really push for more consideration to that rear of that industrial building. It looks like a steel door that someone's just going to have a smoke break out of, and with such great landscaping info there, it really needs to have a kind of equal, presence to the apartments in the back of the industrial. Maybe art, which Brent mentioned as well, or a mural or something like that. I do understand the challenges of the canopies, but for me personally, with the weather and now especially COVID, there's going to be long lines outside these industrial buildings, whether we like it or not, and people are going to get rained on. So maybe there's a smart or a better solution there, or something, just to have people queuing. Yeah, overall, fantastic to see this kind of mixed use, and yeah, really encourage you to celebrate all the uses from a materiality standpoint. But thank you.
Thank you, David. Okay, I'll try to make my comments quick. I'm in the same camp as David myself, but I guess first off, I just want to applaud you on the complex site with the grade change and masking that parkade. I love seeing that around town because I think it makes for much better developments. Obviously tricky to do, but you've done it well. I think I'll start on the light industrial side. I haven't had a chance to review the comprehensive development zone to see what type of uses are there, but typically we see light industrial buildings and we know what they're going to be used for, and it's not necessarily light industrial. At least it's not given our industrial park currently. And so we always encourage to have these wider sidewalks and these ability to provide these space for these different uses. And I think you've got that, but it's almost like, can we just be honest with ourselves, and what is artisan light industrial really? And if it is going to be food manufacturing, and if it's going to be, a brewery, which you've got, like let's make it the best space possible for that. And so I would encourage you to look at that a bit further. So it's not just, a light industrial space that is going to be awkwardly used and they're going to have to cut off half of the parking lot to actually seat it the way it should be sat. I also think the brewery, you're probably going to want to consider having some vehicle access there, because unlike these artisan units that might be able to unload with pallets, I think you're going to want to be able to drive a truck into that building. I would encourage wood and steel construction would be great. I would encourage using real materials, and this is going to be a comment that goes throughout for all these buildings. Like I think the faux material is a timestamp, and at least the faux hardy material. Great to see that you're using a higher quality panel potentially for that board form, but I think we need to move away from the faux wood. If it's going to be hardy, we've got to go to the higher quality material just to make it look the way it should and meet our expectations within the community. On the apartment building, Brent used timestamp, and I think it's a good word. When I saw this building and its general kind of flavor, it does remind me very much of buildings planned in Squamish in 2010. And this is a fairly new project, and it's being done by an exciting developer coming to town. I think there's an opportunity to spice that building up a bit, and look at some different materials, and again, moving away from that kind of hardy. Like you used the word contemporary, and I love that. And a lot of the precedents you showed were contemporary, but I just feel like the actual material palette fell short on the building when it was fully described. So maybe by varying these buildings, to David's point, could produce that quality of being contemporary that you're going for. I would say that 6 foot depth is probably the minimum for balconies. 8 foot is better. The office, the one comment there is that it just is a very simplified rectangular building, and because it has the same materials, it's not really doing it for me. I would encourage you to either look at a different material variation or a completely different color set or palette set there. That's all the comments I've got. And if I could maybe ask you just to turn the presentation center off so I can see presentation off so I can see all of the ADP members. Thank you. So I guess I'll put it there for discussion. Any points of discussion before I read the options? I'm not seeing any. Let me pull up options. So I'll read these out again. Options provided to us are that A, the advisory design panel supports the project and does not need to see this project returned for further review. B, that the advisory design panel supports the project in general and would like the applicant to work with staff to resolve the following recommendations. C, that the advisory design panel supports the project in general and would like the applicant to resolve the following recommendations and return to present the revised project to advisory design panel. Or D, that the advisory design panel does not support the project for the following reasons. Catherine?
I put a motion for C.
Okay.
That's the one that they have to come back to talk to us. Sorry, I'm getting confused. Yeah, C.
All right.
Yeah, I would also say C, just because we've had some mixed feedback about the materials. You know, there's people in support, but there's also people. It's a large development, and I would just like to see a little bit extra for me. So that's why I would veer towards C rather than just B. I would like to see it again and see what can be done.
Okay. Sorry, is someone about to speak? No. And I guess like hearing the comments from everyone and the questions, I would say on the original set that that Asia outlined for us. So there's questions on materials and color palette, but I think it's fair to say that the advisory design panel is relatively split at the moment. Maybe we can take a straw poll on that. Adequacy of weather protection. I think we did outline a few areas where we could look at some additional weather protection, like the yoga area, as well as the front of the light industrial space. We also, the rear of the industrial space was brought up a number of times. Central amenity space, there was not much discussion on that. If anyone has any comments, maybe please provide them that weren't said previously. And accessibility.
And then accessibility.
Yeah, Sarah had a number of comments there that should likely be addressed on the next go around. There's also some comments of bike accessibility and bike storage, and I think generally just the detailing on the parkade, seeing where those spots are going to be placed, and then certainly like we have to see what the accessible parking is like in the light industrial area, because we didn't see any on that plan.
And did we also want to address summer cooling?
Yeah, my only concern there is I don't know if that's within the scope of forming character in the design panel. Certainly something I think we all need to start looking into with this summer's effects, but that's for the applicant really to deal with. Okay, so can I, does anyone oppose voting for C with that list of recommendations? Sorry, Brad.
I think, Carlos, you have to propose a motion.
All right, do I have a motion for C with those recommendations? David, second. Catherine, okay. Any opposed? Unanimous. Okay. All right, well, thank you very much. It's a big site and it's just the first go around, but hopefully that provided some direction for you and the project team.
Great, thanks very much.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Appreciate you looking at it. Lots of comments for us to think about and digest, and we'll go back with Mark and Stephen and have a look at things. It is, it's a complicated site, as you say. It's very tight. A lot of challenges because how we've gone through with the rezoning, we're fitting a lot of uses on here, a lot of needs, and to make it all work, it's sometimes something might have to give a bit in order for something else to happen, but we'll certainly take your comments in consideration and go and see what we can do and come back with a few suggestions. Design, as we all know, is there's a lot of experts here. I'm not an architect at all, but it's subjective, of course. And so while one person like me might think the back of the industrial looks great and it helps to respond to we have to be mindful there's, going to be residential occupants here who are going to be overlooking it, as you point out. So maybe you want something that's more colorful and fancy per se, but we also wanted it not to sort of take away from what's happening in the Muse and be something that is just clean and sort of refined and simple. That's what we were getting at, but
Thanks,
we'll
Greg.
digest that.
Lots of stuff, for us to work on together. And we are trying to expedite this one because of the rental apartment component and the daycare. So hopefully ADP will see this one again sooner than later. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much. Thanks for your presentation.
Yeah.
So, you know, before we close out here, I just had one little bit of point of order, which was, and it's for the panel, advisory design panelist. I don't know if Jonas is here. I think he is. You know, trying to fit that presentation into 10 minutes is all but an impossibility, I'd say. And so I'm wondering if we could have a bit of maybe a quick conversation around like just scoping these segments, so that if it is like a 3-building, you know, mixed use development, that we can maybe just provide a bit extra time within that. We always go over anyway, you know, like, not to say that we should go over, and that's something I'll try to manage. But you know, if it's going to be something like that, 10 minutes isn't going to do it justice.
Yeah.
Yes, I agree. I think maybe what could be done is we could manage those smaller presentations better with the applicants, so that they hit that 10-minute time frame, which everybody struggles with.
I'll tell you, it can be 10 minutes if it's a row of light industrial buildings with like 7 trees, because sometimes we spend as much time on that as we do on a building like this. And so I think, you know, let's pay the attention, like that is 3 different projects in one that we just saw. So I don't know, panelists, do you feel happy with that? Like I'm more than happy to change that time limit a bit, so that we can maybe have a hierarchy of based on total unit or total number of units or whatever it is.
Yeah, I think in the 2 years I've been on the panel, I don't think there's been a single presentation that's been 10 minutes long, and I think that the quality of the presentations range drastically as well. I think that, you know, a 20-minute presentation that is well thought out and is covering key components that are critical in our review is worth our time, whereas a 20-minute presentation where one of the applicants it isn't as concise is not a good use of our time. It's a hard thing, and I don't know if staff see the presentations in advance, but ensuring that pieces that we're seeing are make a difference on how that time is being used, and whether it's a good use of time or a bad use of time, in my opinion.
I wonder if it might be useful to, you know, Jonas or whoever is the planner that's organizing it, to just, you know, if it's come back for that second review, like the first one, we'd already seen it, we'd spent a lot of time, to just kind of be like, let's stay on time here, and kind of, you know, hold them to that, just knowing that some people tend to just kind of go on. And then if it's a bigger project, so just kind of titrate it, like that one, we need to get this one done a little quicker, and then we know we've got people coming, so let's give a bit more space. Nobody really respects the time, but at least we can try and, with your guidance, we'll give you that license to
Yeah, like if we had that last presentation, especially if there were some of us that weren't there, so maybe it was good to have a second pass at it. But like having a before after, like this is the comment, this is the first one, this is how we addressed it. Like that's all that I think the panel really needs to see on a lot of these projects the second time around.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think we can do a better job screening those, especially the smaller projects. We, you know, in terms of how much do we see the presentation before, it's if we do it, it's right before the meeting usually.
Yeah.
So it's hard to control that, but we can certainly work on the timing on those smaller projects and projects that come back.
Okay, sorry. If that's it for the conversation, what do I do here, David? Just call it to a close?
Motion to terminate.
Yeah, motion to terminate. Here we go.
I'll second that.
All right, Sarah. I got Sarah, then Catherine.
Nice.
Okay, thanks everyone.
Thanks so much, everyone. Have a great
Nice
day.
job being a chair.
You did great.
Nice
Really
work,
Try to do
Carlos.
better next. Try to do better next time.
You're doing great. Keep